Welcome to the Virtual CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping service-based businesses achieve success. Are you a business owner interested in learning how to scale your business? Has your business reached over $1 million in annual revenue? Then this podcast is for you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. I'm really excited for a great topic. We have a special guest here, Ian Robinson from Enliven. He'll let him tell you more about his company and more about him. But let's start with that intro. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Jamie. Good to be here. So Enliven, St. Louis, Missouri, and we're actually weird in that we're all in the same city. And also we work remotely. So we're a custom software shop, and we're really focused on, as much as we can be, the professional services space, building software platforms for internal teams generally to deliver expert services. We're celebrating 10 years this year.
10 years.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So as you can hear, we're joined by Jody as well. So
Yeah. I was gonna say, back in for a second. So you're headquartered in St. Louis, and you are also remote. So you've got a fully remote team, or you got a partially remote team, or how does your makeup work?
We're fully remote. Yeah.
So really, you can handle any issues anywhere in the United States or abroad. Then, so you're not limited to a geographic location. Then, okay,
absolutely.
That's cool. When did you go remote by chance? Just kind of curious, getting some background information here.
A non-surprising answer maybe is somewhere around May of 2020.
Okay, so you did.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And we've always kind of had the flexibility of working hybrid or working remote, even when we had an office downtown. But I think just personality wise, we all like to get together and collaborate in person more often than not. So, yeah.
So do you still do those meetups as a team then to collaborate? And where do you do those?
We do. Yeah. We have a co-working space that we meet up at sometimes, but more often than not, we're a fairly small team. So the main three of us will meet up at a coffee shop or the park, and just kind of, we all happen to live in the same neighborhood.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. Yeah, we literally just got back from St. Louis. We had our firm retreat in St. Louis. We have one every 6 months, and this one was at the in St. Louis itself. So kind of piggybacking off your comment. So we are a bigger part of Anders CPA Group out of St. Louis, and they've got about 300 folks right there at the office, and then we've got another 70-ish. That are fully remote. And so we became a division of Anders in April of this year. And so this was actually the first time that a lot of our team members got a chance to even pop into the quote unquote HQ, headquarters there. So it was a great experience for everybody. St. Louis is a great city, had a lot of fun, did a lot of cool stuff. We hung out down there by the ballpark area there.
Yeah.
And then, and both times I've been to St. Louis, I've been to the Tin Roof Bar. So I'm hoping there's other bars there too, although it's pretty fun.
We seem to have others. Yeah. There are plenty. Yep. There are plenty.
Good music there. But yeah, it's the first time we went there, it was karaoke. And did you end up getting on the stage that time, Jody?
Yes, I did. It was an experience you forgot, obviously.
I did forget. Well, I've done karaoke with you so many times that it's hard to remember which time you've done it, which times you haven't. But I remember you doing it there. And then this time it was actually a band that played. That was really good. So,
okay,
that's cool.
So let's get over to. Go ahead, Jamie. Let's go.
I was going to say, let's explore a little bit. So you kind of gave a broad summary of what you do, and as a listener, and me as someone who's listening to you explain it sounds like my imagination is going a lot of different directions. So do you want to give one direction of a solution or one example of a solution you provided that might give context to our listeners?
Yeah. So, and I could give a lot of different examples from kind of the healthcare space or construction. They all have a lot in common, but we're usually replacing existing systems of some sort and kind of modernizing things. So it either a digital transformation or digital re-transformation, something along those lines.
Mhm.
And so one example from the construction space is a company we worked for here in St. Louis called Pinecrest Electric. And we rebuilt a system that they had for managing electrical installations. So
Okay.
they do giant projects, last years with tons of electricians in a powerhouse, or data centers, building new data centers for very large companies that we have all heard of.
Mhm.
And what we do is come in and really get to know their team and their processes, and try and turn their kind of proprietary system and approach into a software product. It's a software product, unlike a SaaS product. It's meant to exist in one environment, but in
Okay.
all the other characteristics are pretty much the same. It's just very personalized. And what I've really come to enjoy about these types of projects is seeing them last and thrive in these kind of single environments over
Mhm.
time. I think one of the issues that a lot of us in the software world have seen is just churn with systems, doing a system, redoing a system. So we're very much into um, kind of creating stuff that lasts about as long as it can.
Mhm.
And we have stuff that's turning 10 this year that that we launched 10 years ago, that's still being adapted and growing with the companies that we've worked for.
So the software, is it mostly like a process software? Like what's your, when you go into an ideal client, are you looking at a
Mhm.
specific, area that they're looking to improve? I'm assuming
It's
process.
Yeah, there's a lot of process, project management, and operations. So it's always data, workflow, reporting, and then tools over that data, and different role-based collaboration. So having variety of features for everybody on the team. In the electrical contracting example, there's foremen, there's field workers, there's engineers and project managers, there's folks that are doing administrative work. They all have a different view on the same thing, right? But this exists as the source of truth for all of their project data. So who did what when, who needs to do what when, really just generally how things are going. And really all that's true. And I can pull a couple of healthcare examples, but one that I'm thinking of is for a regulatory compliance kind of auditing for 340B program, if there are any pharmacy people out there.
Mhm.
And same stuff, right? Role-based collaboration, workflow, really building these custom tools around a bunch of data and being the source of truth for their process, collaboration, and who needs to do what when.
Mhm.
And so earlier you kind of mentioned the long life. So you mentioned 10 years. And so how much maintenance do you usually have to provide in order to keep those things going?
Yeah, if we solve it well up front, it's relatively small. I'd say that when I talk with clients now, my recommendation is budgeting 10 to 20% of the initial budget for year over year, kind
Mhm.
of just health and growth.
Mhm.
That's not really including big chunks of new things. It's more just the smaller kind of paying into the longevity bucket over time.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Right.
I
And
mean, 10 years is, I mean, I haven't even been at Summit for 10 years, and I can't tell you how many different technologies we've gone through in that amount of time. So, like 10 years, and that's something to hang your hat on. Because if you can keep a technology in one company for 10 years, that's pretty impressive.
Mhm.
yeah, and we're it's kind of coincidence because I did a computer science degree way back when, and they looked at me and said, "Do you want to do the Java track or the .NET track?" So Microsoft world or not. I was like, I don't know, .NET. So I've lived in the Microsoft world ever since, and there's been a lot of ups and downs, but one thing that I'll have to say there is there's a lot of longevity there. So in the enterprise software world, you can upgrade and keep all of the Microsoft stuff going. And we're always building stuff for the web too. And that predates my computer science degree. I've always been building things for the web. And the web is timeless in a way that a lot of other technologies aren't, even though it is changing, over time as well. But
so kind of how can you walk me through how a typical engagement would work? So if we were to hire you to maybe help us with a, whatever that might be,
Sure.
How would that work from start to finish?
So the first thing that we'd do after sorting out that it would be a good fit would we do something called a framing engagement, which is really our kind of hybrid strategy and discovery phase, or discovery and strategy phase. And we'll really just frame out all the goals and sort out some of the things that are most interesting to pull out there are really just keeping track of and discovering what everybody's actually doing. So not what they say they need, but what they're actually doing, and pulling assets as we can and trying to put together our own picture independent necessarily of what everybody's saying. And because a lot of times folks are really thinking about their single perspective or their pet concern, which is interesting and important, but it's not necessarily a piece of it's not necessarily something that's going to be relevant for years to come. So we're trying to, in that framing phase, discover what is it that's been true, like what's the spirit of this process, this system that you've developed? Like, why is it working for people? Why are we here? And like, what's been true about that for a while, and what's likely to be true for a while longer? And we're just trying to model that, frankly, so after we get through the framing phase, the framing phase yields kind of a platform build phase. And the build is kind of boring foundations a lot of the times, because it needs to really model all those things about your system, and your worldview, your culture, use all the right words so that it is very accessible to everybody. That stuff really, it can be kind of boring and anticlimactic sometimes, but it's really important to do that stuff first, and really look at it as a foundation, upon which we'll build and adapt, towards all the more speculative stuff. And I'd say from there, it's really, getting it out the door and up and running with everybody using it. And kind of just, we look at it as health and growth from there. So there's some amount of proactive maintenance, there's some amount of reactive support, and then there's more strategic kind of planning and new features that get bolted on over time. But we're working very hard to not work backwards from that foundation, right? We've set up a system that will be durable over time, ideally.
Yeah, you made a comment about listening to the client's concerns, and then those may or may not be the real concerns. Kind of struck me a little bit, because it's like, they may be looking to patch a hole when really they should be building a bigger hole or putting the hole somewhere else, that type of thing. Can you give me some examples of that without, really getting into the clients?
Oh, yeah, that would be. So I'll maybe just think about the different types of things that I've seen and see if I can pull out an example. But a lot of times it can be wanting to kind of go after a specific technology or a specific kind of use case. Now, actually, our recent clients have been pretty good about not wanting to do a bunch of crazy stuff, so that's pretty nice. But a lot of times we kind of we uncover in that framing phase what's more important there. And I'm kind of drawing a blank other than technology stuff.
So let me ask a follow-up question then. So
Yeah.
what I've seen with this a couple times is, or several times when I talk to clients that have a similar experience, is that because you're coming in and you offer an alternative solution to the problem, as Jody mentioned, like they think they need to patch the hole, but they really need to make it bigger. Oftentimes they'll turn you down and they'll say, "Oh, no, we really want to patch that hole." And then 2 years later, 3 years later, or 4 years later, they're coming back to you being like, "Okay, you were right. We're ready to work with you now." So how does that happen to you frequently?
It has happened before, yeah, where folks come back later, and yeah, it's pretty strange. And I'm thinking the reason this doesn't happen as much anymore is because when we get buy-in on the framing phase, we've already made sure that it's a good fit, that they want to hear our recommendations, right? They've seen us as somebody who, can advise them and help them navigate, so they're open. And it's something that I've maybe intuitively or just kind of worked to say no to people that aren't really open to that, because invariably, we're trying to figure out what problems to solve. We're not the folks that you want to hire if you just want us, if you already have figured it all out.
Yeah.
And actually that's one example that I have, is somebody called us up. It was in 2020, and he had figured out a massive kind of e-learning platform, and he had hundreds of mock-ups, and just everything was done already, and and he just needed somebody to make it. And I was like, I mean, I can't even, I don't understand the amount of time that it would have taken for us just to go through all of that stuff while trying to understand some of his core assumptions. Like, he's not a software designer. And so trying to work backwards from, oh, I put this button here, to why are we even solving the right problem in the first place? Like, what is the point of this thing? So it can be a little bit tricky when folks have the resources to commission a big work, and maybe should be commissioning a much smaller work to start. Right?
Yeah. So you actually go through that and you identify that within the first phase. So after the sales call's closed and you're ready to go, first phase, you're diving in and you're uncovering that. And if at that point, like you mentioned, you might end up backing out of the engagement at that time versus, going forward.
Yeah. And we'll be,
no one's going to be happy at the end. They're not going to be happy. You're not gonna be happy. It's not going to be a good ending, no matter how you approach it then.
And that is, I always worry about it, but it's always well enough received, right? And everybody feels, or at least I feel good about it afterwards. Maybe they'll feel good about it down the road, if not right away. But
so in my notes, I think a really interesting area you work on that a lot of companies are thinking about right now is the hiring. So can you give some examples or some ideas of how software can improve that onboarding, hiring phases of a company?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And the way that I like to think about that is, when we're building these platforms for internal work to be done, we're creating a digital work environment, or a big part of it at least. And that encompasses all the SaaS products that you buy, all the, all the different things that everybody's using. We really like to go to those pieces that are core business operations, again, project management, the expert service delivery. And those pieces tend to bring out more of the culture and personality and like industry expertise for a given company. And so when we're building these platforms, oftentimes kind of a secondary way that our clients look at it is, oh, this helps with recruiting. And it helps with recruiting because it sends signals that we're taking care of, we're giving, we respect our employees and we give them good tools. So it can kind of look good from afar in that way. But then when employees actually get in the door, a lot of the challenges that I've seen in the past is people have systems and processes documented, and then they have them implemented somewhere. And that thing that they're implementing them in was a SaaS product built for many businesses, right? So there's always a little bit of a gap between what we say we do and then how we actually do it. So one of my favorite parts that's very easy to take for granted is when we're building a software platform that's at the heart of service delivery, it's modeling their world and their vocabulary in a way that it can kind of provide guidance and education for how the company works in a very hands-on and tactile way. And I say it's easy to take for granted because you show up and you're like, okay, I need to jump in on this project, and they add you to it and you get in there and things tend to make sense. Though everything you're looking at in the software is what your coworkers are talking about, right? In the same words, you don't see different words. Like we say it this way, but you have to click on a completely different button. And I mean, it sounds a little contrived, or I worry that it does, but think about how many buttons we're clicking all day. And then think about us over all of the employees over years, right? In all of these different ways that we're just creating unnecessary overhead and unnecessary complexity. So, you know, it's not necessarily the thing that gets us in the door or necessarily closes a sale, but it's, I think, one of the keys to things staying relevant over time is really taking that seriously, that, hey, we're welcoming everybody into a home base of sorts for this area of the business. And so it's not just some tools to get our work done, it's also kind of the source of truth for our process and guidance as well.
So it sounds like people should, or I mean, if a healthy companies should always be looking for what tools can we use to improve processes, to improve employee experience and improve customer experience, because they all kind of, you know, go into each other, you know, they all kind of flow into each other. And I think when a person or an owner or a CEO of a company thinks that they've got everything dialed in and everything's perfect, they may want to look back in the mirror a little bit, because there's nothing's ever perfect, and they can always.
That's fair.
Yeah. So how would I, as a CEO, go about that task? Is there like a simple way that I could kind of look through my processes, my things, and say, you know what, a tool that you could create for us would be hugely beneficial? And how would I self-assess that, I guess?
I think the biggest thing that I've found here is actually trying to gauge human emotion, right? So looking for pain and frustration is the number one, right? So if there's, and it can be difficult because people normalize this kind of, we kind of expect software, not like we expect to have to adapt ourselves to it, because of course it's not going to know what we want from it. Like,
Right.
Which is, you know, maybe our thing is, well, it shouldn't always be that way. Maybe it should never be that way. And maybe we are really good at normalizing things that we shouldn't. But I think going through and actually looking for, you know, we can look for inefficiencies or extra overhead or mistakes and problems. But I would really do a lot of sentiment analysis, so to speak, to find out how people are actually feeling about it. That's, you know, the main thing that I'm focused on, above and beyond kind of meeting the specific needs of the project, is making sure that everybody is feeling good about things.
So you come into a new client and you're trying to figure out those questions, like how many people do you need to talk to on the team, and how do companies feel about, you know, okay, I'm gonna talk to these 30 people because they're the largest users. Like, is that something they get excited about, or like, oh no, I'm not sure I want you talking to all my employees to ask these questions?
Well, actually, I've had both experiences. Some cultures are very open to finding problem areas and addressing it, and other company cultures aren't. In fact, we've had our hand kind of slapped a little bit and go and to like rein it in, because no, we don't want to send signals that there are problems or that there could be problems.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay. Sure. Yeah, we're just trying to make sure, we're just trying to check in, right? We're not like looking for problems. We're just checking in with folks to see how things are going. So it depends. And I don't think we typically don't have to talk to a huge volume of people to get a good sense of it. And you don't necessarily even have to ask them like, how much do you hate this? Or how, very direct questions about their feelings. Well, let's just talk about how you work. Go take me through your workday. What do you spend time on? What do you spend time on that feels kind of repetitive? And like, oh yeah, if you could come up with another way to do that, that would be great. So it's generally, when you really get down to it, it ends up, the conversations are much softer, and they're not too they're not too contentious. Yeah.
You're not just going into a room and saying, hey, just lay it all on me. I want to hear everything wrong with this system. And then the company come back to the company like, here's everything you're doing wrong, and here's how we're going to fix it. Like, no one likes to hear that.
Though, kind of, even when we do discover better ways of doing things and implement them, there's always this hurdle, I think, of just change, right? People don't want to make change. And a lot of times, again, we've normalized using software that doesn't understand us and doesn't understand what we want out of it. So people have created great workarounds that they're very proud of, that were hard won. They could be hard to let go of. And, but that, again, I worry about those things, but we've in the end not really had a problem with that either, because once people realize they can let go of all of that stuff and there's a better way, they're pretty quick to adopt it. So
yeah, I can imagine. Well, we are right at time here. So Ian, I'm very interested. We end all of our shows with kind of your final thoughts. So this is your one last chance to tell all of our listeners what they should be thinking about after this podcast. So I'll let you go first, and I'll let Jody wrap us up.
Cool. Well, yeah, I had one thought that I have a wide variety of interests. I was reading through some architectural essay, and there was a quote that struck me that I think adapts pretty well to my work, which is something, I'll paraphrase it. It was something along the lines of the primary job of architecture and architects is to create a space that feels like at least subconsciously reassuring, right? So the idea of, we've all been in a waiting room, which you're not meant to be in, you're meant to leave it. So that space doesn't want you there. It's not necessarily very reassuring and welcoming. And I think in the software world, and we say at least subconsciously, because you don't have to hit people over the head with welcome signs, right? It just has to feel like you're in the right place. Oh, this is for me. And I think that, that may be a very subjective thing, but I'm interested in stealing as much as I can from the discipline of architecture, because they've made that objective in a lot of ways too. And so that's a little journey that I'm on, but I think it would be good for us to all try to at least have a gauge of how reassuring a particular digital work environment is for ourselves, because that stuff really adds up over time.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And, that was one of the big things that I love about our company is we're constantly looking for ways to improve processes, constantly looking for ways to improve technology, always looking to better our people in all different ways. And the combination of those three is really what makes automation so successful, what makes profitability so successful, what makes worker experience so enjoyable. And I think if you at all stop and quit evaluating that, I think you're doing yourself completely a disservice. with everything. Never get too attached to any particular process. Never get too attached to any particular software, because everything can and will be improved. And with technology growing at the speed it's growing right now, I mean, the software that was the gold standard yesterday for your firm may not even be in existence tomorrow. You may be on to something different, right? And that's the beauty of it, and that's the great thing of running a company. And I think if you're not bringing an Enliven into your company to at least evaluate what you might be doing right and wrong, the worst case scenario is they come in and they say, you know what, you guys are doing everything great. I wouldn't worry about it. Or in the worst case, or in the best case scenario, they say, hey, you can improve on things. And I say the best case because there's always, again, looking for that improvement, and bringing them in would be a huge benefit to find out if that process, that you've been doing is taking your team forever. They're frustrated every time they're using it. And then you find that there's a tool that can be developed to eliminate the process completely. That's a big benefit and a big kudos. So I love what you're doing. I think it's definitely needed in really just about every company out there. And I definitely have enjoyed the conversation for sure.
Likewise. Thanks.
Yeah, I was a little worried when you mentioned welcoming architecture environment that Jody was going to talk about his experience at Meow Wolf. So I was glad Jody went where he did.
Bullet dodge
down that road.
I'm going to go down that road again. Yeah. So thank you very much, Ian. And you as well, Jody. I thought that was a great conversation, and look forward to talking to you guys again soon.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving business success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.